So you're looking at millennials right now. It's unlikely many of them will be able to buy a home anytime soon. People staying at home longer, living with the parents. And I saw in San Francisco something recently wherein, these new companies, they call them pods now, wherein you have a bunk bed, so to speak, in shared living space with a bunch of other millennials. Not everyone is a millennial either. I mean, all kinds of ages in there. Like that's a new thing, and it's affordable. How do you get into doing something like that? Because I mean, that's something that if you built out, people would rent. How do you make something like that happen?
It's really the builders. So yeah, if you build it yourself, then you're going to benefit greatly from it. Or if you're just trying to get into that piece of business, then most of these people who are building these similar types of living situations that you're talking to, the builder has what's called their sales or their sales staff. So if you want to get into that because it's going to continue getting more popular, you want to reach out to builders who are doing it and say, I'd like to be on your sales staff to represent these people coming in who are buying or all going to share these buildings and lease. Otherwise, if you want to benefit the most, you're going to have to build it. You're going to have to do it yourself.
I mean, but renting something like that just seems so weird because it's not a true apartment per se. It's really a shared space. So would you need like a special permit for something like that?
Yeah, it's gonna have to fall under certain zoning in LA, multifamily and everything. You're not going to be able to do that in a residential neighborhood without question. But you're just going to have to take the time to understand, okay, where can we build this? Where is it allowed? And what are the liabilities? What are the disclosures? Kind of like a condominium association has their CC&Rs. You're going to have all of that. It's all going to have to be agreed on from everybody who's in these shared spaces. I don't think it's really going to go to a level where it's a significant percentage of homes or that area, but it is a new evolution. So sure, I mean, it's already been being done. To go back to the fact that millennials or the new generation is paying what you had said, these astronomical rents and stuff, and they're not buying. They are buying across America on average, but we only see our market where we live.
Okay.
So here, of course not.
Yeah.
And it's not because they can't afford the mortgage, it's because they can't afford the down. So if housing, let's say a cookie cutter track house in Brentwood or Westwood or Culver City is 1.5 million, right? And we don't have any more of that fake housing market financing that we had in 2004, which is 100% loan to value, no down payment, stated income, 680 FICO score, right? Where they can just go into the mortgage payment like rent. Then where are you coming up with the 20% down? Where are you coming up with at least 10% down? So they have great careers. The young generation might be able to afford what a mortgage payment would be on a $1.2 million mortgage, but they can't put the $300,000 down because they haven't saved up enough money. So they're paying these astronomical lease amounts, which are actually holding them back from saving up enough money to eventually buy. So it's a catch-22. But it's not that the new generation doesn't want to buy or they don't look at home ownership the same way. It's because in a lot of areas, especially the 20th big cities in America, that's where they can't, for the most part, buy. And that's where the general media talk about those big urban areas. But I speak somewhere in America almost every week. And in some of the most smallest town areas to some of the biggest urban markets. And once I start getting out of big urban markets, because I ask questions to the audience, I say, what's the home ownership age group? Like who's buying homes? And it falls significantly. But if I was to ask that question to an audience here in LA or Manhattan, New York, besides trust fund babies, they're going to say over the age of 30 or on average.
Yeah.
But in outside suburban area, 24-year-olds are buying houses. 22-year-olds are buying their first condo.
Yeah, okay. All right.
But it all talks about that down payment, right? And even if we're going to a rental industry, meaning it's going to become less and less people who own homes, the home still has to be owned by someone. So there's no such thing as a house that's rented out by the city, for the most part. There's situations, but for the most part. So when you think about that, no matter what, somebody has to own the home, and who's the agent that represented that person to buy it, to then rent it out to the millennials. So it's a matter of also who are your clients, because 10 years ago, 17 different people could have bought 17 different homes, and 17 different agents could have represented those transactions. And now most of those people can't afford it because they don't have a down. But who has the client who can buy those 17 houses and rent them out? And now that agent is the one that's being able to do all these transactions because he has that client. So I really try to push agents. You got to make sure you're going after people who can actually afford to invest in real estate, because it's going to continue shifting where a very small percentage of people can actually buy, and that means if you don't have that client, you're not going to have any business.
Okay, so with that in mind, you have guys in LA, San Francisco, living in vans who make money, decent money sometimes. You just can't afford the home and you don't want to pay this in exorbitant rent. Would you advise people like that to say, hey, why not invest in properties out of state, rent those out, okay, and then live your life here without ever having necessarily to buy a home here? That makes sense to you?
All the time. And that's what I learned the first time. See, that's what I learned after the first time when I lost everything, is I was too focused on half the properties I lost weren't even rented out. I was like, oh, I don't want to deal with a tenant. And they would just sit empty in whatever town they were or whatever city, but they tended to be in areas of vacationing, Palm Desert, Arizona, the Bay Area, Maui, LA. I was building 2 gorgeous spec homes in Malibu to flip because I was an owner builder now. So I wasn't being smart with the real estate I was buying. I thought I was, but I was buying real estate at the highest point of value price and in a fake housing market. And so now what I try to educate people on is, look, I know you want to buy your first house and I know you're wishing you could right now, but there's nothing more that creates wealth than owning real estate, and it's not in your just primary residence. That's not where you're going to gain extraordinary wealth. It's use outside areas. Buy $200,000 houses in the middle of the desert somewhere outside of Phoenix, Arizona, or Detroit, Michigan, knowing eventually more people, less dirt. Detroit needs to make that area really nice now. Push them even further out, make that area a nice neighborhood now. And now before you know it, your values have all gone up $100,000 on each of them, and your renters have already paid off half of your mortgage.
How do you find those kinds of homes, though?
You got to be willing to reach out to real estate agents in those markets. First, it shocks me how many people just don't think. You start at Google. Like, what are the best prices for houses in America? Like, start figuring out what are the top 10 cities that you can buy a rental property in and probably cover the mortgage payment in the rent. You're going to be able to read Forbes articles. It's going to immediately tell you some of the cities that I just mentioned. So now you reach out to real estate agents in those cities and say, I'm thinking about investing, and do you handle that? And do you know that area? And then your agent starts working for you.
But then you would need a management company to kind of handle that for you, right? Because you can't.
If you don't want to, yeah, especially if it's out of the area, you hire a local property management company who's going to take their 5 to 10% of the rental income. That's their fee for managing it for you, and done.